Hi there, Grace Judson here with another Leadership Geek video, and this time we are talking about how to brainstorm effectively when your team is remote. You have a problem that needs solving, a challenge to address, and you want ideas from your team, but everyone's working from home, so you can't sit around the conference table and write ideas on the good old flip chart or whiteboard. So what do? I'm about to tell you. I have led any number of brainstorming sessions, both in person and remotely. And here's what I can tell you about them. Most traditional brainstorming just doesn't work well. You may have noticed that already. Why is it? Well, I'll tell you in a minute. But first, I want to remind you to subscribe and click the little bell because I release a new management and leadership skills video every Wednesday and you want to be notified, right? Okay, why don't traditional brainstorming sessions work very well? Well, mostly because people don't want to risk being criticized by their peers or by you, their manager. They don't want to look or sound stupid in their teammates' eyes. So they censor themselves. They double check to make sure their idea isn't too far out there. In short, they don't want to take the risk of being vulnerable. But it's the out there and risky ideas that will ultimately generate the best results. Even if the original idea isn't exactly the right one, it can be developed into something that is going to be far better than when people don't speak up with those ideas. So, what can you do? Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to have two great approaches that I know you will be excited to try. But first, whichever approach, whatever approach you try, you need to set the stage before you begin. What do I mean by that? You need a clear problem definition. What problem or situation is the brainstorming session intended to address? Because here's the thing, without a clear vision of the desired result or the goal that you're aiming for, you'll get ideas that just won't be useful. I'm including a link to an article down below in the video description that talks about this in a little more detail, but here's the kind of thing I mean. Story time. Once upon a time, I was at a friend's house for a party and I asked her, as one does, what can I do to help? She handed me a cutting board, a knife, and a tomato and asked me to cut up the tomato. I looked at the tomato and I looked at her and I said, what's the goal? She wasn't sure what I meant, but it was really simple. Did she want slices for sandwiches or chunks for salad? You get my point, I hope, because if you don't start with a super clear definition of your desired end result, you're liable to end up with chunks of tomato on your sandwich, which really doesn't work well. And this is a very simple example, but I think you can see that as the problem gets more complex and more important, it gets more important to have that clear definition. So that's step one. Define the end result. And be careful here because you'll be tempted to define it in terms that you know are achievable. But that limits you. Don't limit yourself by asking, how are you going to get there? Because after all, that's the objective of the brainstorming session. And if you figured out the how beforehand, why bother to brainstorm? Okay, so you have your problem definition in hand and you have distributed it to your team at least a few hours, better yet a full day ahead of the brainstorming session. Here is brainstorming approach number one. Have everyone work separately on their own, not on a call, and write down their ideas. In this approach, I encourage people to write as many as possible, the more the merrier, because when people get the tried and true stuff out of their heads onto paper, they'll start getting more creative. And then they should hand in, obviously that means emailing you, their ideas to you as the brainstorming session facilitator before the meeting. You collate them, you eliminate duplicates, you group them together according to the general approach, and leave off people's names at this point. Again, we are protecting the people who may, for whatever reason, be hesitant to put their ideas out there. And when they know ahead of time, you'll need to let them know ahead of time that this is how it's going to work, they will feel more comfortable to just really blurt out ideas that could end up being really great ideas, right? So Distribute the list of ideas before the meeting, and then in the meeting, it is open for discussion to choose the best idea or decide that several ideas can be blended together to achieve the best result, or even to piggyback off of some of the ideas that were proposed to come up with something that is then incrementally better again. And obviously, by the time when you've selected something, you will give credit to the person or the people whose ideas turned out to be the ones chosen. Okay. That's the first approach. Here is approach number 2. This one is called the 6-3-5 brainwriting technique. And no, I didn't make that up. You can Google it and find references for it. I'm going to say ahead of time here, this is not necessarily going to be simple to explain. So please don't drop off the video. Don't stop watching. Hang in there with it because it does make sense in the end. And I also am including a link down below that has more, like I said, that has more details on how to do this. But hang in there with this because it is a little complicated in the beginning. Okay, just like before, you want to make sure everyone has a clear definition of the brainstorming goal. You want 6 people on the team for this. That's the 6 in the 6-3-5 name. You can do it with as few as 4. You can do it with as many as 7. But with too few people, you don't get enough ideas. And with too many, it gets overwhelming. And actually, that's true for any approach in brainstorming. Too few or too many isn't always the best answer. So you need to do a little setup first. You need a Google document or whatever shareable document format your organization prefers, one for each person, and they need to be shared as editable for everyone who's participating. And then you also need to set a sequence of how the documents will be passed on, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. To start out with, each person has 5 minutes to write 3 ideas at the top of their document, and that's the 3 and the 5 in the name, right? 3 ideas, 5 minutes. 6 people, 3 ideas, 5 minutes. They then pass the document on to the next person, and this is why you need a defined sequence. And you can actually set that up in the document titles so that Joe's document is called Joe, Sally, Sue, Tyler, James, Helen. The document name actually contains the sequence so that each person automatically knows which one they should be in at each stage of the game. Sally's document then will be called Sally, Sue, Tyler, James, Helen, Joe, and so on. Now, again, before you decide this is too confusing, don't drop off. This really is a cool approach, and I'm including that link below in the video description to the article that describes it. But hang in there with me on this because now what happens is that each person in the cycle has 5 minutes to write their 3 ideas in each document. They can piggyback off the ideas that someone else wrote. They can come up with new ones. Obviously, I hope they should not repeat their same 3 ideas over and over again. So Joe writes in his document, Sally picks up the document for the next segment, she writes in it, Sue picks it up for the next segment, and so on, so that everybody has a document in the has their place in the sequence. I hope this is making sense. So then when everyone has written their ideas on each document, the final version again is passed to you as the facilitator, and then you get to combine and group and distribute for discussion. Now, this second approach, the 6-3-5 brain rating, obviously requires a team that trusts each other because the sense of anonymity isn't there. But it's still a better approach than shouting out your ideas in a group for the very simple reason that people have time to think without being interrupted or told that their idea isn't any good. It's worth noting that both these approaches are especially helpful if, as you almost certainly do, if you have introverts on your team. Introverts are far more likely to write than speak their ideas, and both of these approaches give them the think time that they need. Introverts process internally, while extroverts are more comfortable processing and thinking out loud. Okay, I hope this is helpful. I hope you stuck in there with me. I'd love to know if you have some other interesting approaches to brainstorming. And you know the drill, click the thumbs up button if you found this useful. It's not just a nice thing to do for me, which it is, so thank you, but it helps you to determine whether other people will be interested in what I have to say. So it helps other people find this information. And obviously, you also want to subscribe because I post a leadership and management video here every week, every Wednesday. If you try these approaches, do let me know how it works. Leave a comment. If you have questions, by all means, ask. I come back and answer all comments. Check out the links in the description down below because it, again, like I said, has more details on how to make this particular process work. Take care and happy brainstorming.